We're filming, I assume, right? Oh, okay. All right. Start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody. And welcome to Susan Stern. This is her first meeting with us from the school board as their representative.
Oh, so, thank you very much.
Yay, Susan, because you don't have enough to do. I'm glad we were able to give you something.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much.
Fill up your, tremendous amounts of spare time with. So wouldn't want to,
Keep my dance card full.
All right. Has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes of our last meeting? And if everybody's done so, do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
Also move.
Anybody second?
Second.
Claire will second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. All right, the hard part's done. All right, let's move on to reports. Take it away, Tammy.
Thank you, everyone. Just to talk a little bit about our March and April, mostly activity coming up. Right now, we're in a little bit of a transition where we're still winding down some of the late winter programs and gearing up the spring programs, which is a very exciting time, although it doesn't seem a whole lot like spring today, or the last few days for that matter. So unfortunately, a lot of the spring things have had to be canceled due to inclement weather. But we're actually excited about a really busy spring. In your report, you'll see a list of all the programs that are some of them winding down from winter, those that are gearing up. As you can see, our preschool programming activity continues to remain strong. Some of the highlights is just our upcoming preschool t-ball program that'll be at Willows Park. We have 80 participants across the 4 sessions. We also have a preschool soccer that'll be going on there. With 227 participants across 22 sessions, and a lot of other really great programming. Of course, our Champions basketball program, although it's winding down, we're going to be starting up a multi-sport program that's going to be coming soon, so there'll be more information. Registration will be opening up on that here in the next week or two. We also have seen the return of lots of great programs, such as Ultimate Frisbee, our skateboarding clinic, our adult yoga, our Griffin volleyball program. So a lot of those are getting ready to kick off. And then, of course, we're also in the transition of registering for summer. So right now, Radnor Day Camp summer registration is about 120 participants. Our Wizarding Camp right now is sold out with 2 sessions at 60 participants in each session. That's a program we run directly in-house, along with, of course, the day camp. Our World Cup Survivor Nature Camp over at the Willows has about 415 participants in it across the 7 weeks. So the Willows is going to be very, very busy this summer. And then, of course, we have a partnership this year with ESF to run the Junior 76ers camp at Radnor Activity Center, as well as Phillies Baseball Academy camps over at South Devon and Warren Philippone Parks. We're heavily in the staff recruiting process, so if anyone knows anyone that's looking for a great summer job, working with kids, especially at Radnor Day Camp, or at Summer Wizarding Camp as a support leader or leader 1, leader 2, we are looking for staff, although the recruitment process is going very well, and we have secured most of our leadership, our head leadership at all of the camps, which is terrific, especially given the hiring climate right now is a bit tenuous. So. On Friday night, we had our 2nd annual Teen Flashlight Egg Hunt along the Radnor Trail. So we all gathered at the Wayne Art Center location in the dark, and we had about 80 teens that we organized that ran in both directions on the trail and searched for eggs and trinkets and all kinds of treats, high and low. And of course, we had prizes that included a lot of really neat teen-interested, teen-favorite type gift cards, like things to gift cards to Tilly's, Chick-fil-A, Five Below, and also a number of great prizes like Nothing Bundt Cake. Who doesn't want a Nothing Bundt Cake? Buntlet. So that was a lot of fun. We also have coming up in April, we have the Youth Trout Derby, which is sold out. So if anybody's looking to participate in that, they can certainly jump on the wait list. We also have an orienteering event that'll be coming up at the Willows, which is filling up, so if anyone's interested in that, they should definitely act fast. And that'll also be the same day as the Willows Park Preserves Wellness event on Sunday, April 24th. And then also, you have a specific flyer in your packet that I had provided for the Arbor Day celebration. This year, we're going to be celebrating 30 years of Radnor Township being a Tree City, USA, which is a really exciting milestone for us, as well as this year being 150 years of Arbor Day. And we'll be doing a tree planting on Friday, April 29th at Odoricio Park at 4:30 p.m. So if you can make it, that would be great. It's a nice little ceremony and celebration. I believe Howard Holden will be gracing us with his presence. I believe he will be there. He is, of course, our founding father of Arbor Day. So I'm happy to hear that he'll be in attendance and excited to share the milestone year with him, as well as other members of the community. And hopefully we get a lot of neighbors, of course, to come out to Odoricio Park. A couple of other quick updates. And another great event I would love to invite the board to come out to is Wheels of Wayne on Sunday, May 15th at 1 o'clock in downtown Wayne. We have a great pizza contest that we do each year. Of course, the event's been on hiatus for 2 years due to COVID, but we're excited to get it back this year, and registration is high in terms of the registration of vehicles and vendors. So if you're interested in being a pizza judge, I'm not sure if our pulled pork portion of the contest is going to come to fruition this year, but we know for sure that our pizza portion will. If you're looking for something to do and you like pizza, would love to have you there as a judge. In addition, there's also an invite for a new event that has come to fruition, which is the Emilyn Tinnell poster dedication. So for those of you who maybe recall, there was a memorial poster that was developed when the ship was commissioned in honor of Emilyn Tinnell back in October. And that poster is going to be dedicated to Radnor Township and the Board of Commissioners on behalf of the United States Navy League Council here in Philadelphia and the U.S. Coast Guard Foundation. And it's being developed as we speak as a graphic panel that'll be affixed to the comfort station over at Emilyn Tinnell Park. So we're really excited to have it mounted there, and it'll be there for those to experience and allow for the legacy of Emilyn Tinnell and those who may not be familiar with all of the great accomplishments that he has had live on and being at that location. So we're excited about that event. There's an invite in your packet for that, and we'll be sure to, it's on the back of the Arbor Day flyer, and we'll be sure to send you more information as we get closer, of course. It's a very exciting event, and we're excited to be part of it. And, of course, the contribution to Radnor Township by those two great organizations. So if you have any questions on that, let me know. I wanted to cover a couple of the park projects going on that aren't necessarily reflected in the balance of our agenda. So one, namely, is Capelli Driving Range. Although there's no construction going on there, the parking lot right now is going to be serving as a staging area for a sewer project that's going on over on Brookside Avenue. So there's going to be a limitation to the parking. I know we've been trying to get some messages out on that. And the township engineer tells me that that's going to be for about 3 months, which is a considerable time given we're right in the middle of spring and headed into summer, of course. So there'll be a few spots available over there. So we'll be asking anybody who's using Capelli Driving Range just to, if they can't find parking, they're more than welcome to come over and park here at the Township building and walk across the little bridge down here at the bottom parking lot and head over to the park that way. And we've also been in communication with Little League to ask that they not park there so that we can leave those spaces open for the golfers. We'll touch on, of course, the basketball court renovations here in a bit. The Ithan Valley Park, the access way at the exit is still closed, so the entrance is still being utilized as an ingress-egress. There was structural undermining that had occurred there, and it's a project that's currently in design for repair. So for those of you who frequent Ithan Valley Park, you probably have seen that there's some limitations on the ingress and egress at the park, and that will be the case for the long term until we end up defining the design and completing the design and going to bid, and then end up with a construction project ahead of us. Radnor Memorial Turf Field is going to be replaced in June. Believe it or not, the turf field's up for replacement already, given the thousands of hours that it's used, of course, on a regular basis, a very popular spot, especially with the contribution there that was made by Agnes Irwin School. And that project will be covered in full by Agnes Irwin. They will be overseeing that project. And it will be a field turf brand of turf that'll be reinstalled. So we've been able to have a good relationship with Field Turf, and I know they interviewed a few different companies on the replacement, and Field Turf is who they are moving forward with. So obviously that's going to stifle our usage a bit in June, hopefully not too far into July. Obviously things like weather and shipments and back orders and things like that might impact the length of the project. And then lastly, there is a sanitary sewer line that's going to be coming across Lancaster Avenue and going right into Veterans and First Responders Park. And unfortunately is going to shut that park down for, I'll say maybe a month at most, so not too long. Right now the project's awaiting equipment to be delivered to be able to take care of the project, but there's a sewer arm that literally goes right through the center of the park, and then it makes a dog leg west, we'll say, and it goes right through the playground. So it's going to cause the playground to be completely opened up, and obviously there'll be trenching and everything that'll occur there to be able to install the line. And we'll be communicating with the neighbors, of course, when that project, we know, have a better timeline on that project. We believe it's going to start probably mid to late May at the earliest, but looking maybe more like June. Again, just due to some supply chain issues with being able to get certain pieces of equipment.
Tammy, do we know how long that's going to take?
That one will be about a month. Maybe we'll say 6 weeks at most. I know as soon as I say a time frame, it's hard to judge right now with weather and, you know, lots of other variable factors with regards to shipments and delays and all that kinds of stuff with regards to equipment. So unfortunately, that is going to shut the park down because there is going to be equipment and everything stored inside the park that just won't make it so that it's not safe. And because it'll take up and impact such a large part of the park, the best decision is really to close it down.
Tammy, I'm sorry, is that going to be a sanitary sewer line that's servicing Lancaster Avenue or Midland?
It's coming off of Lancaster Avenue.
And going down to Midland?
Going across and feeding right into where the neighbor is on the other side of the park, on the western side of the park, and that's it, just right there.
Still on Lancaster?
It's going to come across Lancaster Avenue, come into the park, like, you know, perpendicular into the park. It's going to make it's going to turn west at like a 90-degree angle. It's going to go right through the playground, and as soon as it gets into the next property, that's where the project ends.
Thank you.
Is it an emergency situation where they're replacing it? Or
yes, it's deteriorated, and
so it's already there.
It's already there. This is a replacement. And that concludes my report, unless you have any questions on anything. I know there's a lot of other things included in the report. If you have anything else that you want to talk about, I can certainly take some questions.
Questions? All right. Looks like we don't have anybody from the Board of Commissioners tonight. Are we waiting for Sean to show up?
Sean and Maggie will not be here this evening. I did hear from them, but I guess I could give probably 2 updates. So first of all, their Monday meeting has been canceled just due to lack of quorum. So they were supposed to meet on Monday the 11th. So their next meeting won't be until the 25th of April. So just to give that update. And then also at the March 28th meeting, the ordinance prohibiting the sale and distribution of the kratom within 1,000 feet of a playground, a daycare, or a school was passed unanimously.
Okay, thanks, Tammy. Radnor Township School Board. Susan.
Thank you. So following up on, I think Ms. Dunn gave a report last month at the school district. We've embarked on a long-term capital planning study. We engaged an architect, and we did have our community meetings in the month of March, and I just want to let everyone know that on Tuesday, April 19th, we're going to be having a special board meeting, and at that meeting, we will be giving the district and the community and the rest of the board So there are some of us who have actually served on the feasibility study committee. This presentation is now going to be brought to the full board and to the public, not to make any decisions that night, but just to inform the board, inform the public, kind of lay out where we are with the plan. And then moving forward into May and June, there will be, recommendations, and ultimately our board will be taking some action on the crafting of on the crafting of a 10-year capital plan and what that will look like. So much like the township is doing a 10-year capital plan on parks and things, the district is embarking on that for our 5 school buildings and the administration building.
Susan, can you give us an update on the facilities that's happening right now? How's that going?
Oh, sure. So you mean the high school, the infrastructure and wellness project? Well, I think the rain is probably slowing things down this week. Things are moving along, and they are moving inside, I believe, pretty soon. And, we are hopeful to have the full project completed in, I think, November. But the fields, in the next few months, the fields are going to become increasingly open and accessible. And, it's hard to know whether like this is how that affects on any day-to-day, but it's moving forward. It's a really exciting and important project and important improvement to the high school. And I think when it's done, people view the high school as a community resource, and that will be a community resource that's going to be able to be much better utilized by everyone. So we're excited about it, and it is moving forward. Thank you.
Yes, I attended the last meeting, and what a terrific group of people they are. Just really sweet. I mean, just wonderful to work with. I guess the main thing that I would report at this point is that on April 23rd, they're doing their spring planting. And specifically, large canopy trees will be planted throughout the township. If I'm 5 on the trail, 10 at Odoricio, or 11, I think, 10 at the Willows, 5 at Clemacrone, all large canopy trees. And they're all looking for, like us, they're looking for volunteers the 23rd. If you're happen to be free, please contact the Shady Tree Commission. They are able to also secure a small grant from the Philadelphia Horticultural Society, and so they're working in conjunction with them. Let's see. Their goals for the year are to plant collectively 150 trees throughout the township. That's their long-term goal for the year. They, like us, are looking at the word out for communication. Shade tree ordinance information, what is doable, what is not doable, what are the guidelines. And so they're trying to get it out without, of course, using too much paper. But
What are a few trees here?
And they're also looking for volunteers for tree maintenance. That's ongoing. So they're always looking for volunteers. And if anybody is interested, what a really terrific group of people. It was a pleasure to be with them that night. And other than that, that's pretty much all that affects Parks and Rec. Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm glad you had a good experience.
Yeah.
That's great. Do we have any other reports of any kind? I think we do. Okay. Let's move on to new business, and this should be fairly quick. This is updating our park stewardship program, making sure that each park has its assigned park and rec board member to keep an eye on it and report any problems. And Tammy went ahead, you should have all gotten either, electronically, but it's in your packets as well, I think, maybe not. An updated list. It's not etched in stone, it's sort of etched in wet cement. These are Tammy's proposals, and some people had actually volunteered. So I hope everybody's had a chance to look at it. Are folks comfortable with their assignments? Is there anybody who would like to change anything that's been assigned or take on more work? Yeah, I'm good with it. Tammy, where it says on here, not accessible for like Ardrossan and stuff, well, Ardrossan in particular, is the public not supposed to be walking through the Ardrossan parcels at this, that are ours, that we've acquired for parks at this time?
There's nothing formal that precludes them from doing that. It's just there's no public access.
Oh, there's
So,
no, yeah, there's no.
similar to Fifth Ward Park, Martha Brown's Woods, which I
Got it.
realize is a school district property. Uncofer Park is only pedestrian access, so just, that's why I wanted to footnote those ones, so.
Okay, I see.
That folks just understood that they're not really a parcel that, you know, we're looking to make improvements on because there's infrastructure and, you know,
Right,
they're just
okay.
not easily accessed,
No, I get it. That-
especially as the spring months and summer months become in fuller force. They are more difficult to access because of the growth.
So
Okay.
when you talk about Ardrossan, what portion do you mean? Because the corner of Newtown Road and Darby Paoli is kind of totally accessible if you're willing to hop a fence or, I mean, it's
Sure, but
there,
it's
pretty-
not, there, it's not open for public access. There's not a defined trail, there's not a defined amenity.
Got it.
No
of that.
signage or anything like that.
Then
There is,
that's what
there
you
are
mean by-
signs now, and so there are 3 parcels that we're referring to when we refer to Ardrossan, which are signed, the Rye
Oh, there are
Field, the Wheeler
signs.
side, yeah, and the quarry,
I didn't know that.
the quarry tract, so, and there's signs, they're new. We just installed
Oh,
them
okay.
in November.
Should've seen 'em.
And so we're not, I don't want to endorse anyone to go out there and traverse because they're not really defined for public access. And like I said, once the growth starts to come upon us, there'll be ticks and vines and lots of other things that just really don't make for, you know, safe access there.
Okay. All right, move on, old business. This was, has been our homework
Oh,
assignment. I'm
can
sorry.
can I just interject one thing? I apologize
No,
with
no problem.
regards to the Park Steward program, just because a lot of folks I know are kind of new to this. Actually, I think maybe even everybody, almost, I don't think we've done Park Stewards for a while, so might have even gone back to Andy's time with us back in 15, 17. So I wanted to talk a little bit about it, just in a sense that if you're in your park locations and you see something that is an eminent need, like there's some dangerous situation, piece of playground equipment isn't operating, you know, functioning and, you know, looks to be unsafe, or some other situation, if you could just reach out to me right away so we can address that and not wait till the next meeting to kind of bring it up and bring it forward, I think that would be really helpful. The same would go like as if you see, you know, something strange going on in the park that just doesn't seem consistent, you know, obviously if there's something that warrants calling 911, if you could do that, and then if you let me know what's going on too, that would be fantastic. Or if you just, you know, see something that maybe just doesn't look right. And then if maybe before the next meeting or before meetings coming up subsequent, just maybe send a list of your concerns or some of your things, even if they're not, you know, if they're not immediate and they're just sort of like footnotes and stuff. That would be helpful. And a lot of times it's going to be on Public Works list already. I mean, they do a great job of managing what's out there. So even though you might see a piece of fence that's broken or a parking lot that's, you know, a little unstable and needs some patchwork, chances are it's sitting on Steve Ledgerton's list. I know he has a heavy one at this time of year. You know, there's work, we know there's a lot of work to be done, you know, from the winter especially, they're working through. And then obviously if there are, you know, assessments that you make that facilitate our upcoming conversations, by all means, save those for the upcoming conversations. But if you think there's things we need to know about right away, let's address those. If there's things we need to just put on this is a maintenance to-do list, having those sooner versus later is really helpful, because then I can facilitate it with Public Works and we can start getting those things done. Again, if they're things that we don't already have on our list. So, sorry about that. I just wanted to kind of
No, I
interject
think,
the
no, thanks
process
actually
there.
for explaining that. Tammy, I'm thinking we should put this as a standing report item or something on the agenda, just to get us thinking, as a group, thinking, you know, routinely that if it's not a screaming emergency, that this is a good forum to report, oh, by the way, I think, you know, in the next month or 2 or 3, we need to do X, Y, or Z, so that we're constantly focused on it and don't sort of forget about it.
I think that sounds great. Like I said, I just asked if there's anything we can have an opportunity to fix.
Oh, no, I think if
Report
there's
it, let
something-
us know so we can get
Oh,
on it.
absolutely, yeah, and then we can report that we reported that at the next meeting. But just to keep us focused that that in addition to showing up here and doing whatever preparations we do, that, you know, as a monthly matter at least, we want to be out in our parks and kind of get in the mindset of it, get in the habit of it.
Okay. I do have a question about, only because I got assigned the park and hearing Tammy's report. So the Veterans Park on the capital report is slated for playground equipment replacement, site furnishing, some fencing replacement, and walking path resurfacing and repairs in 2026. And I don't have a strong opinion about 2026 per se, except that we just found out that it's going to be so ripped up in the next 2 months that it's going to be closed. And I'm just wondering if that, it sounds from how you described it, Tammy, that the sewer replacement is in conjunction with a private property adjacent to the park that happens, the sewer line happens to go through the park. So I'm just wondering, you know, how put back together will Veterans Park and Veterans and First Responders Park be put back together in conjunction with this sanitary sewer line replacement? Who's responsible for that cost? And would that perhaps change our thoughts on the timing of walking path resurfacing or, you know, fencing repair, or, you know, you're going to move the playground equipment. What if the playground equipment, I was there a couple of years ago with my granddaughter, and it was fine. It's not like the best kids park in the neighborhood, in the town, but it's fine. So what's the plan for evaluating that? And as I said, I'm only saying that in kind of in conjunction with the 2026 timeline that you're looking at for that park.
So a couple of things. First of all, the contractor's been instructed that the park needs to be as they found it. So, and that's a standard with any park project that's going on that, you know, might be sewer, gas, or something that maybe doesn't have to do exactly with the park amenity, but that contractor, and I know Steve Norsini and Dennis Capella, our staff here, will hold them to a high, you know, standard of how they need to restore the park. So they know that it needs to be restored as they found it, or better. In fact, I asked them for a new playground, and they declined, of course. I always try to get my opportunities in, trust me. So I'll keep working that angle, though, as it evolves. But by the same token, I have every belief that the playground will be restored, the walkways will be restored if they're disrupted. On a separate situation with regards to the walking path, Public Works has the opportunity to get in there, and there's some cracks and some areas where it's sort of like beveling upwards, and restore those areas. So obviously that's not something they're going to do until this project is done, unless obviously if there was something that was directly impacted by this project, we would hold the contractor accountable for it. So on a major project like this, there's an enormous bond, as I'm sure you're familiar with, that allows us to go back on them to collect any restorations that are needed, or any, you know, issues that come up or arise where we're not satisfied with the restoration or the project.
Okay, so it sounds like something could change with the capital plan, just as an ancillary to this project, but.
Well, right now, the township isn't operating with a capital plan. So,
Okay.
you know, if there's, these are projects that sit within our capital plan. You know, I believe there are other projects within the capital plan that are needed, you know, as more of a priority than what goes on. That's what's going on over there at Veterans Park. I don't discount the playground. I mean, the playground's in great shape, though. I actually just played on it the other day when we met with the contractor, so it is in very good shape. It may not be the most appealing of, you know, items, you know, within the park. It's not a Clemacrone, let's be honest. But by the same token, in the future, if we do have an opportunity where we have an established capital fund and we know that the project over there, you know, could occur, we definitely want to see that happen, which is why it sits within our plan. You know, we also are working closely with the American Legion, just concurrent to all of this, on a memorial celebration type project within the park. So right now there's an old fountain area, as you probably recall, that was there and operating in the 2000s and then stopped working, and obviously would cost the township a lot of money to restore. But in the meantime, I know we had a presentation and a heavy project that came before this board to establish basically veterans and first responders memorial area within the park, which is something we are still having major discussions on. So That is something I know we've done some fundraising to generate some money for. It's not something within the capital plan. You'll see it on this list at the bottom because it's one of those items that, as we segue into the discussion on the capital plan, that will be funded by supplemental dollars, in this case fundraising, that's generated by the Township and by the American Legion. So that's something else that sits out there on the horizon. If we make a determination that there are projects that have an eminent need sooner, we can certainly move those up in the project as we go along. Or I should say, in the plan as we go along. So maybe that's a good time to transition to our next topic.
To our next topic, which
Hopefully
is...
that answers your question too, Susan.
No, that was fine, thank you, appreciate it.
Again, we've talked about this a little bit in the last two meetings, and we've got a fresh, sort of reorganized, newly put together chart, outline, whatever you want to call it, on capital projects, and some that may be good candidates for the Park Impact Fund that we currently have money sitting in, and it would be nice to spend it sooner rather than later, before prices shoot up even higher than they already are, and supply chains get even worse than they already are. And there's no shortage of possibilities for how we can spend that money. But I wanted to try to, if not fully figure out what our priorities are to the penny of what we have available to us, to at least get started on funding some projects that seem to be, very valuable, probably, more urgent than others, and, meet other sort of characteristics too. I mean, they're reasonably priced, and they serve the, broadest possible community, and all those other factors I went through at our last meeting. So I hope everyone on the board has had a chance to look at this, come up with what they think should be priorities, come up with some questions they may have for Tammy on what in her judgment, her department's judgment, are the projects that we maybe should be focusing on, and of course we're going to want to hear from the community as well. I'm not sure. Did you want to start off, Tammy, or should I have start with you?
Sure. I wanted to explain sort of the new outline just a little bit. First of all, as you'll see, there is a lot of shading going on in the document. So the first page of all of the green shaded items, and then on into, I guess, about a quarter of the next page, really is just a shading to like kind of two-tone each park, so you can sort of visibly see them. So the green doesn't really mean anything other than it's just helping you distinguish each park, because there's so many. As you can see, this is a hardy plan, and I'm sure it doesn't capture every single item that sits out there that needs to be replaced. As a matter of fact, just to talk about that, I had a conversation today about Radnor Memorial, and we were discussing how if we were to use the auxiliary field that sits on the other side of the multipurpose field, and lacrosse is going on, you can't really have another program happening on that field because there's nothing to shield a lacrosse ball that can come, whizzing over into that area. So, okay, that probably would be a great idea to consider some serious screening to where a lacrosse ball, can't come into that space. And then that auxiliary field on the side can be a usable space, where we could have a preschool program or, a champions program or something going on concurrently. So that's just an example of how, I know I always say the capital plan is a living, breathing document. Today it was alive, and it spoke to us that it needed that added to it, which is not in your list. So these kinds of things come up, and as we know, we can go into a park and find some things that, maybe are broken today that weren't yesterday, that maybe turn into a need. But we're trying to capture almost everything, that sits there, because we know playgrounds, that were built in the 1990s, we have quite a few of them, they need to be addressed at some point. We had 2 instances just in this past year where we had broken down playgrounds from the 1990s where we had to make costly repairs. Actually, 3 of them, O'Connor, Odoricio, and Cowan. where we had slides and we had a transfer bridge that had to be replaced, and we ended up spending a lot more money to have, piecemeal kind of, correction made to those, whereas, obviously in the grand scheme of a replacement, it wouldn't be the same situation. It's not a good economy of scale. With that being said, so I guess maybe the one thing to start on is the bottom of the document at the very end, where there's a list of projects that are gray. So those are things like Fenimore Woods that we know is already funded. We have a bond, we have borrowing that took place in 2016. We have the project under development in terms of design. Cowan and Odoricio Park basketball courts, those have been funded by a bond in 2019. Those are underway. Construction's happening as we speak. Veterans and First Responders Park, I had made reference to that. It's, obviously a project that is going to be, from a memorial standpoint, would be funded by fundraising dollars. There's no expectation that the capital plan or direct taxpayer dollars would go towards that from a borrowing, in that sort of situation. So I put those at the bottom because, they're kind of taken care of, they're moving. Above those in orange are a lot of our trail projects. Our Darby-Paoli Trail System that's under design, our Radnor Trail extension, which is under design, and then there are a few engineering projects that are sort of peppered in there that I like to include because they ultimately impact the park. But those are also moving because they're in part funded by a bond, specifically the trails were in part funded by the 2016 borrowing, as well as grants, and they're under development, and they're evolving. So those aren't projects that would be impacted by the Park Impact Fund. So ultimately, those projects may end up needing additional funds. If that's the case, then that's something that probably would have to be discussed as in a different discussion, in a different bond potentially, because as those projects have evolved since 2016 when money was borrowed. As we know today, anything we estimated in 2016 is pretty much void. So I kind of try to keep those separate. We have the Willows Park, which is traditionally operated, kind of with its own fund and own funding mechanisms, as well as Radnor Activity Center. Tried to sort of splice those two out. I know those are going to be part of some heavier conversations to come, just given the magnitude of potential restorations that might be needed at the cottage, restorations that would be potentially needed or are needed, we'll say, at Radnor Activity Center. Those are not things that the Park Impact Fund is going to accommodate, because those are significant and they're comprehensive, requiring a lot more time and effort. And certainly through these processes, the Parks Board will be engaged. So, as we start to look at, the potential, future for restoration of the cottage, Radnor Activity Center, and these trails, these are projects that will come back to you. You saw them in the past and would definitely see them moving forward. But again, not subject to the funding. It wouldn't make sense to take, what did we determine, $275,000 from the Park Impact Fund and allocate those to these projects. It wouldn't get much done. So what that leaves us with is kind of everything else, which is what I had outlined in the green. And there's sort of like a top section to that where I have sort of like, I don't want to call them all the more immediate, but let's say like 2022 to 2024 sort of recommended projects. And then I put a dark green line to kind of separate everything else below that that's sort of like farther out years. Not to say that some of the things that sit in those out years, again, might become a pressing issue sooner versus later. But the things that are higher on the list are definitely, like 2022, 2023, things that we're looking at, I think, a lot sooner, let's say. So that's where I kind of wanted to make some of those distinctions. So hopefully that makes sense in terms of how they're sort of better organized, just for a visual. I try to make it a little bit easier versus just the overall alphabetized list we had before with the two-tone shading. So hopefully that brings it a little bit more into view. So I don't know if you want me to go into these one by one, or if we want to look at them in sections, but I added the column for the timeline, again, best estimates. For instance, if you just look at Odoricio Park, that's a project where in 2022, we could engage design. So I have it listed as 2022. So then the actual construction of the items outlined, which is potential for the future, I just have 2022 with a plus to indicate that it's, I think if we when we truly engage that project, we might even be looking more at 2023 when we would actually go to construction, just given the timeline. But something we're looking at in 2022. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. These projects mean different things to different people. I have conversations with people all the time that have priorities in certain park areas where they want to see, things change, and, it's balancing a lot. Like we always talk about, there's, we have requests, from the commissioners, the Parks Board, the community, special interest groups. Sometimes, like if we look back into the past, we know with Radnor Memorial Park, Agnes Irwin came to us. We had an opportunity to install a turf field, so that became a priority project. We didn't pay for that project, but that's something that absorbed all of our attention. So sometimes there's ebbs and flows to how the project development goes. We welcome partners. So that's, that'll be my plug for P3s. We welcome public-private partnerships. Look at what happened at the Willows. The Willows is being restored amazingly because of a great partnership that we've been able to endeavor. Obviously, the township has complemented with some funding there, but those are sometimes the catalysts to get these projects done.
Well, I'm wondering, does it make sense for folks on the board to ask Tammy, assuming that everybody's looked through this and has some questions in addition to some opinions, maybe ask their questions or volunteer their opinions, and then maybe we can hear from Tammy on in her professional judgment, what she thinks are some of the more important ones. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yeah, Tammy, I'd like to ask a question. Especially since we had several meetings on site in the past year and a half, it seems to me that the most in need is Odoricio. We've been there, we've seen it with all the repairs going to the other places with Enki and Clem, and it seems to me Odoricio is that balanced need at this point between the playground, the comfort station, the basketball court, and I think once you start with the basketball court, I think it's a good way to get the ball rolling, and I would like to promote that we take a look at Odoricio's renovations. I guess my question is, what are your feelings on Odoricio leading the way?
Well, I definitely agree with you. I think it's a park that has a lot of usage. There's definitely there's a neighborhood. It's a densely packed neighborhood, so I think it checks a lot of the boxes to where we would see it being a location that definitely has a need. I know it's a ball we do have rolling. I know we just recently distributed a letter to all of the residents, encouraging them, to reach out to us, join our interest list. We're going to be holding some, focused meetings coming up, which I know we've had some discussions on, trying to balance that with Fenimore Woods, to kind of keep those projects so that, we're not discussing them on the same night, when we have hearty discussions on those, we're trying to balance them. And I think we even talked about the potential that maybe in June, like May, June, or July, we might even want to hold an actual meeting either at the park or at the park and in conjunction maybe with the RTCA, the Radnor Township Civic Association, if they're willing to host us, so we can make it easy for the residents to get out and start to have those discussions. Because it's important for us to understand what folks want to see. We know there's a lot of sports groups that use the park. The school district uses the park. We balance them. St. Catherine's, Radnor Wayne Little League, Legion Baseball. Everyone has a kind of a stake in the game there, so to speak. To where we know there are a lot of needs, and we want to hear from folks. Because I know, I talk with folks, and I've had some people say to me, like, "Hey, we can just paint the comfort station and dress it up a little bit, make it better." But then I've had other people say, like, "We'd really love to have a gathering space, and we'd love to have a pavilion there." Now, whether or not that looks like something we have at Fenimore or that looks like something we have at Emilyn, Tinnell, again, for us, we want to try and understand that need before we spend a lot of time going to design and feasibility. As we saw with Fenimore Woods, we spent some time on that. We went in that direction. And what we realized was we didn't hear from everybody. We didn't know truly what everyone wanted to see. So, there's a lot of money and time that get caught up in designers and engineers. And, moving forward, I think we're trying to really shift that process so that doesn't happen anymore, especially how costly things are today. So I agree with you. I believe Odoricio is a key location. I think I voiced to this board in January, I feel strongly about Enke Park because I know we have I believe it checks a lot of boxes as well. And, the safety needs there with the surfacing and the installation of sunshades, I know is something that we want to start to potentially endeavor. One could make an argument, I know, about a lot of locations, but Odoricio definitely is definitely a key location that we would like to focus on.
So, Tammy, do you have any kind of rough dollar amount? Let me ask a different question. What's the yearly budget in the township budget? What's the yearly budget for the park, for the kind of park stuff? And by the way, I appreciate that you pulled out, so PZO Gym is not going to get covered under a park budget. The work at the Willows, the work, even a big part of the, some of the trail stuff, those are bonds and down a different kind of conversation. But what's the yearly township budget for these park things?
0.
Okay, so it's not a line item in the township budget. All right, that's information, thank you. In terms of, so one of the things I look at this, and certainly, a sequential, this is what we're thinking 22, this is what we're thinking 23, 24. That is certainly one approach to this. But sometimes the other approach ends up being, if the appetite of the community and the commissioners was such that $43 million budget, something like that, right? The township budget, isn't it? It's something like that. It's in the 40s. If we as a community said, every year, we think it's reasonable to invest X number of dollars in our park maintenance, whether it's $500,000, whether it's $20, whatever the number is, then you start to prioritize, okay, well, what can we do with some amount of money this year, next year, then the year after? And so sometimes that comes down to, you have to have a little bit of a sense of what some of these projects are going to cost in order to be able to then prioritize within any budget. And so I was just curious, do some of these have even back of the napkin numbers, and would a column like that be valuable? And believe me, I recognize, and because we've been doing it for 2 years with the feasibility study, I'm telling you, numbers from 2020 are, no longer valid. So I do know the challenge there, but it's without any concept of what any of the numbers are. It would be, I can, Bill, to your point, I can say that Odoricio Park is the highest priority because of the use and all of that, but without any numbers about what this all might cost, the numbers might really drive, are we doing a comfort station or are we just repainting a comfort station? Do we have the money to build a pavilion? So somewhere in this, it's organized well, and trust me, I really appreciate the color coding because it does break up the different, that you went back and forth between shaded and unshaded. It does help you see the different areas, but at some level, there needs to be some kind of estimate about what something might cost if there were going to be a recommendation on what we can reasonably recommend in a budget year.
Susan, I understand what you're saying. To save Tammy the trouble of coming up with 60 different cost items for the 60 different options here, I think what we might have been striving to do is get a sense from this list of what we think we would like as priorities, with only the vaguest notion really at that stage of what the cost might be. And then, hopefully Tammy either does already have in the back of her mind, a rough notion, or can fairly quickly come up with one. So yeah, I totally see your point. If it's kind of hard to pick and choose when you don't know what, if it's pie in the sky or whether you can afford it or not. But I think we're trying to do two things at once. Is keep the, let's see if we come up with some sort of common sense of the 2 or 3 things that we do think are the most important, and then we've saved ourselves doing all those cost analyses for all those other projects that no one really thought were kind of in the ballpark, so to speak, anyway. I don't know, was that what your thinking was, Tim?
Well, just so you know, there's cells that are included on here that are part of this spreadsheet that aren't included because it's just such a moving target.
Yeah.
So, I mean, our finance department would never let me submit a budget without numbers in it, so
yeah.
they're there. But as you know, and as you stated, they change, and, you know, making restorations to a comfort station to building a new one can range, you know, from $20,000 to $600,000. I mean, it's quite a swing. So again, Mary, I think you kind of nailed it there. I think we just want to get a sense of the projects. And what we've also found is if we come out of the box with numbers, folks, they tend to hang their hat on those. And sometimes the projects evolve to the point where it's either, you know, much lower, much higher. And we're in an unstable environment right now with regards to cost, so it's a difficult thing to do. It's certainly something, you know, Steve and I can look at these numbers and ballpark them without a doubt, but by the same token, there's such a swing going on right now that does, to some degree, make that difficult to do.
Continue.
I'm sorry, go ahead,
I'm
Bill.
sorry, just continuing on the discussion. I think we're Odoricio, I think it's hard to argue isn't a park in need. The comfort station alone is really just something that needs to be addressed. I think we have a couple of issues before us that we have to think about, and it is what's the scope going to be of the Odoricio renovations. On one hand, I don't want to use the analysis that it's going to be a huge Macrone, Fenimore Wood-size project and kick the can down the road another decade on the park. On the flip side, though, I don't want to piecemeal something that doesn't get a grander vision if that's what is desired on Odoricio. I like Tammy's proposal with respect to Enki because we do have, for a change, some funding there that we could use to do some good. And you know, was it the enemy of the good is the perfect? Nothing's perfect here. And that gives us I'll call it bite size because in the scale we're talking about, $135,000 is not a large amount. You could actually dedicate those funds to something and get something done that is a pressing need, but we can't lose can't lose the thread on the Odoricio project either, because that needs to be, in my mind, the next one up in terms of any kind of scale, if that's what the neighborhood and the community as a whole wants.
And I think, too, what we talked about in January was using the balance of that money to potentially fund the design. And I don't know what the design costs would be, but I have to believe that, you know, given the size of the space and, you know, and we don't know if this is going to include the wooded area or not include the wooded area. We've heard mixed feedback about that over the years on how that could potentially be developed, not be developed. Obviously, we want to hear that from members of the public, but to design we'll call it the non-basketball court areas, right. And I don't think we're going to change the baseball field. But, you know, there's a possibility to engage that design firm by the end of the year, or even, you know, as we turn the corner even into the new year. So
that was actually a question I had, was could we use the balance of that fund? The other suggestion I would have is it's something that we have talked about for many years, at least during my tenure here, and it's a few items down, and it's that whole tree removal and maintenance issue. And our problem has always been funding that. And if you had some amount to get something done in that realm, because I don't think anybody who has paid attention to any of the parks disputes that there's a need there. And we've talked in the Fenimore discussion, feathers right into that about tree canopy and whatnot and preserving what is an incredible asset for our town. That's another possibility you can actually do something with some of the funds. So, sorry, I put in 3 cents instead of 2, but thanks.
And one other project I would just, you know, put out there, well, there's, well, one specifically, I think, just for consideration, again, this is one of these things that have evolved. You know, at Cowan Park, we do have baseball that takes place on the baseball field, t-ball, and obviously the younger ages. There's no safety fencing in front of the player benches. There's no foul line fences at those parks. So, you know, I think maybe that could warrant adding that into the mix as well. Just taking a look at the usage that's happening in the park, that there's a possibility that we may want to consider that we could potentially put that in a safety bucket. Not to complicate the discussion, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
With Odoricio, I know you mentioned there's a lot of stakeholders. Has there been any discussions about contributions from any of those stakeholders if certain things were done? I just don't know if the discussions even gotten down that far.
Well, discussions haven't really gotten that far, but I do know that the Legion and Radnor Wayne Little League have an interest in potentially adding dugouts to the baseball field, which to me is a contribution. I think it's definitely worthwhile to have there, given the popularity of the space and the usage. But that would be something that we would want to continue that discussion about. Again, that sometimes helps us get projects done to a greater degree than we anticipate.
And I would just sort of second both of the Bill's sort of thoughts about Odoricio. And the only other comment I would make when I look over some of these projects, the ones that sort of jump out at me, I think, are the ones that have playground restorations that are adjacent to athletic fields. Whether we like it or not, those playgrounds become babysitters during games for a lot of us. Those seems to be the ones that would have the most potential for, how should I put this, that safety issues and other sort of people getting very excited about things that would come up there. So that's just sort of a general premise I just wanted to put to the board.
Was there talk last meeting about someone putting in dugouts at Odoricio? Was that the Township or Radnor Wayne Little League?
The Legion and Radnor Wayne Little League have, I think more so the Legion funding. That was a project that I believe Mark Jordan is the leader of Legion Baseball, brought forward to us, that's something that they have some interest in potentially funding as time goes on. And I know they were looking at putting a shed, installing a shed behind the backstop located at the baseball field. So I think the size of the shed that they're hoping probably is not feasible without considerable grading and the establishment of a retaining wall, given the slope and the hillside that comes down. So I know we're taking a close look at that, and I think as a short term, they're going to look at like a smaller shed, like more of a vertical shed that can house like the L screens and the rakes and some of the other pieces of equipment, not necessarily some of the greater pieces of equipment like a tractor, which I think they were hoping for. I think that's going to be a little bit more difficult with more feasibility. And I also suggested that with the prospect of this project, maybe there's a redesign to the park that may move the comfort station down closer towards the baseball field. I'm not sure how utilized and needed that parking lot is up above. I know it's something we want to learn a little bit more about. I know some folks park there out of the convenience of being able to come down the stairwell and be right at the field, and sometimes that leaves the main lot open. So I think that's something worth having a discussion about, and sometimes those things sort of flush out through that information of engaging the public and hearing opinions and wants and wishes and all that fun stuff.
That parking lot closest to the ball field is underutilized because that's foul ball central. The higher elevation spot is the preferred parking there. So that's a good idea. That would be a nice idea to kind of meld the two there. But again, we're getting ahead of ourselves in terms of ideas.
I can say that I was also approached by a lady this weekend that she has a son, and I know I'm going to screw the term up, the ADA compliance and all of that. She has a son with vision issues, and her son can't really participate in baseball or kickball or things like that unless you have a bright color there. As he's getting older, his sight is starting to diminish a little bit, but she wants him to be able to, even access the park, just coming in. She wants, I guess, more of a sidewalk there to be seen, where he can feel safe about going to the park and making it home. So I know the community is very excited about when they saw the court being, addressed. They were very excited about when the conversations were going to start for the whole park basically. So it's on everybody's mind when the next meeting's going to be. So. And they're just glad to see that something's being done.
Anybody else? Any input, any questions?
I just wanted to comment, Tammy, thank you for organizing it this way. I think this really helps our board sort of prioritize in a way that where we're not losing focus on things that we want to get done. To Bill's point, we don't want to kick the can down the road, but we do want to still continue to focus on Fenimore and get that solved, while knowing that Odoricio is going to be dovetailed in that process as well. So thank you. I think that this lays it out really clearly.
Anything else from board? Anything further? Tammy, should I ask our members of the community if they have any input on this topic? Come on up.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Jim Higgins. I live at 102 Luella Avenue in Wayne, and I thought that Tammy was going to precede me and talk specifically about sunshades at two of the parks, well, one of the parks. Previously, my concern about sunshades had to do with two parks, Clemacrone and Enki. So I'm going to resort right now to a statement I made to the Board of Commissioners last September. It's very short. It'll save me time. It'll save you having to listen to some rambling. I hope you will take action and adopt the recommendation of Tammy when she makes it, that we install sunshades at Enki Park. The project at Enki involves redoing the surface because it has deteriorated. As you know, the surface there is synthetic, I'll call it foam rubber, but it's deteriorated. So the township wants to move to make that playground safe by changing out that surface. And at the same time, I'm hoping that you, as a board, will recommend to our Board of Commissioners that we install sunshades at that playground. And Tammy will talk about the particulars of it, but as I understand it, it would be 2 or 3 sunshades, and that would provide shelter for the little ones. I've taken my grandchildren to both of those parks, but right now I'm speaking just about Enki. And it's a very uncomfortable situation from about May 15th to September 15th. As you know, with climate change, our summers are much hotter, and there's no shade at Enki. There's no shade at Clemacrone, but there's no shade at Enki, and with sun shades we can not eliminate the problem entirely, but we can create a situation where little ones and their parents will be able to resort to a break time in the shade and thus take refuge. So I hope you will move ahead on this and move ahead promptly. I originally thought we could get it done in time for this season. Maybe by August, Tammy can address that, because there is a problem, as we all know, with supply chain and available labor. So thank you very much. If you want to ask me any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Question is, are you looking for shades to cover the playground or to cover an area aside, parallel to the where children can go and rest?
It would be infeasible to do the whole playground, whether you're talking about Clemacrone or Enki. It's just, you'd have to have a very, very large structure. So the idea is to be selective and find 2 or 3 locations where the children won't necessarily be in the shade while they're playing, but they can take refuge, break time, to these 2 or 3 locations. Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure. Tammy, did you want to give us some additional input on that?
Sure, I can. Thank you, Jim. Yeah, so this I just tie back to January, and when we first started talking about the Park Impact Fund and potential project allocation, and I did make a recommendation. My interest, of course, was very heavily in replacing the surfacing. We had a significant surfacing breakdown there. I can show some pictures if you guys want to take a look at it here in a minute, just some of the most recent pictures just that demonstrate, I call it potholes, that are sporadic throughout the surfacing. Unfortunately, we had a vendor that did not install properly, and we ended up going back on them several times, approximately 6 or 7 times. They came back and they made significant repairs that ultimately just did not hold. The thing with the poured-in-place surfacing, you know, once you have water intrusion and it gets in, you have such an opportunity underneath for expansion, contraction, freeze and thaw, and all those kinds of things that happens due to the weather. And unfortunately, that's what occurred in this space, no matter how many times we tried to make the repairs. The error with the installation was it should have been installed in one contiguous pour, so that it's one contiguous piece of melded, granulated rubber pellets, basically is what comes together to comprise the wear course. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. We didn't learn about that until after the fact. They did 2 pours within that square footage of playground surfacing, and then what it did was it created a seam. So if you go out there today, you'll see that a lot of the issues are on the seam. There also is just the general breakdown of the wear course. So we tried to take some legal action. Unfortunately, the firm during COVID they retired. So, you know, they terminated their business. And we worked heartily with our solicitor to try and achieve some sort of recovery on this project, and we just were not able to. So, you know, my general thinking there is, it's a very high traffic location. You know, I know all of our playgrounds are used across the township. So it's not just because it's here and it's at this location. I realize they are all utilized, and I do visit all of them at different times. But we do have a key location out here, and I know with the baseball fields being, you know, close, you know, and proximate, and lots of heavy usage on the weekends, the township building, you know, there's a lot of folks that, even though we don't have sidewalks, you know, they're walking down Brookside, they're coming down Ivan Avenue, you know, trying to get to this playground. So I think, you know, it kind of checks that box, you know, of safety, usage. You know, I think is a playground that, you know, impacts a lot of folks, you know, and a lot of residents. I don't get the sense there's a lot of non-residents that come to the township to use Enki. I get the sense there are a lot of residents that come to the township to use Enki. Just in my interactions with folks that I see there, it's probably a fairly good assessment. So the thought process is, you know, when we have an opportunity that the playground's going to potentially be under construction, rather than come back, you know, a year, 2 years, 3 years later and try and contemplate a sun shading system. And I know we've had lots of discussions. We've talked about, you know, whether we would cover, you know, the entire major play structure. We talked about designing a pergola trellis that would cover either portions of the playground or the main play structure. You know, it seems like the most feasible approach is to, you know, generally when you see sunshades and, you know, in the Northeast, they're sort of sporadic throughout, you know, an area. So you have an area to seek respite underneath, not necessarily something that, you know, is covering an entire play structure that can be 2, 3, you know, stories high, you know, like we have at some of our playgrounds. Whereas, you know, you have like kind of like a 1-story decking here. We have 2 stories over at Macomb, much higher space. So it makes that more difficult. It's more of a customized design at that point. Could potentially exhaust all the funds in the park impact fee. So the thought is, you know, smaller playground, you have a picnic table area, you know, where families sit and they have lunch, you've got benches. If we could provide, you know, 16 by 16 cantilever styled, you know, sunshades that are designed specifically for playgrounds. So these aren't things that you'd put in your backyard. I mean, this is an actual playground manufacturer that's producing these for this purpose. And the other thing I would like to take a look at that would be considered in the project that I had outlined before you that would expend these funds could look at the potential of taking the upper deck portion of the main structure and designing a roof for it, so that when kids are on the deck moving around and, you know, using some of the play features, there's a roofing system that could be retrofitted potentially to that, that I could definitely endeavor feasibility with our playground manufacturer, which is Playworld Systems. which I believe is feasible. If you look over at Clemacrone, we actually designed them with those because of the units that we had designed over there happened to have them. But I think there's a way to potentially get those on here too, so that there is some level of protection for the kids when they are on the main play structure. So that was the thought process there, and we take one opportunity, shut the playground down for whatever the time frame is, we get everything done, finalize the project and move on. Doing things piecemeal, it just, I think, causes more aggravation for the community. The playground shut down multiple times, and whatnot. And, if we decided that, we wanted to make some sort of compromise through this project, I think we could definitely consider, instead of going to the poured in place surfacing, we may want to consider the wood chip engineered, the fiber engineered systems that we have at some of our other parks. We certainly could do that as well. So I would ask the board to contemplate that project tonight. I would also extend that if we felt important, if we wanted to add, earmarking funds for Odoricio design, that could potentially be added into this as well, as just a support mechanism, just to show our dedication to that project. We may not get to design until the end of the year, but nothing also says we have to expend all of these funds by the end of the year either.
No, it's a good idea that if we have it in hand, again, with prices going up and we don't know how long that's going to continue, I mean, there it is, rather than have it sit in a fund, put it to use, without, obviously, we want to properly vet all the possibilities, and we don't want to just rush into something and spend money for the sake of spending money, which I don't think we would do. But it would be nice, as Bill said, to get some stuff done, something, fairly concrete done. I don't know if others have some questions about that. I did. Can you tell us, I know you've told us before about the costs of both of these projects. Can you remind us again of both the resurfacing, either with the kind of surface we already have, resurfacing with maybe something else like the fiber engineered wood chips, plus however many sunshades we think makes sense. One of my concerns about sunshades was, I don't want to create the expectation across the township that we can do sunshades at every park or every playground in the township, but this might be a good opportunity, especially given the timing of doing repairs to the surface anyway, to run sort of a pilot on this and see if this kind of thing works. And then maybe we're talking about, doing this in the future at other parks or something similar. But anyway, back to costs again for all those different variations, Tammy.
Sure. So for the cost of the replacement surfacing with poured in place, which is the same surfacing that exists there now, along with 2 to 3 sunshades in 2 to 3 different areas of the park, and then the potential installation of a roofing system, I estimated that at about $135,000 to come in and do everything that's needed, all of the corresponding demo that would go into, the removal and disposal of the current system. And then obviously, if we went the wood fiber engineered route, which is just wood chips that have fall attenuation to them so that they can sustain, different falls from different levels. They're installed at certain depths to be able to absorb and compress. Would probably be just under 100,000. 95,000.
Tammy, of the 135, what's the breakdown between the shading and the resurfacing? If you know?
So the surfacing comprises about 80,000 of that. Good question. Sorry, I didn't clarify that. And then going to the engineered wood fiber is about 40 some. I mean, some of these prices I had gotten in February, but
And then
they're
Tammy,
close to holding.
I'm sorry, I thought you
No,
were done.
sorry.
No, I apologize. In terms of any type of upkeep or replenishment of the wood chips, any idea, if we line out a 10-year window on the cost, are we going to be exceeding the cost of doing the rubberized surface?
Well, usually when we get the wood chips delivered, we use them in all of the parks because there is a replenishment that goes into all the locations. So for instance, Public Works is probably working on those as we speak. Out of the some of the trenching and what have you that happens throughout the winter, from rain and snow and all of that. I know that they order it in a load. I'm not sure how it works. I know they spread it to the different parks, so they may order a, I don't know, $5,000 load or $10,000 load, but they disperse it among all the parks, so I don't have a direct breakdown on what that would look like. I think the maintenance delta is probably a net the same. I mean, there is a level of maintenance that has to go into the surfacing too. It has to be, a blower has to be run on it to blow off the breakdown of the wear course over time, because the more wear course that actually breaks off and sits on the surface, when the shoes grind on it and people run across it, it actually breaks the surface down further. So I try to get the guys to go over and blow that off, with a blower every so often, just to keep it, keep it so that it doesn't have the pellets all over the surfacing.
And then, I'm sorry, just to follow up on that, I know you mentioned there was concerns about the vendor who put in the current system. Have there been any other issues in other locations where a similar system has been used, which would give us pause to go down that road again with the same system?
Right. We have the same port-in-place system over at Macrone. It's our only other port-in-place system. And that playground was built in 2017. Yeah, 2017. So we haven't experienced any issues at all over there. And I definitely make that a checklist item to go over and look at that just to see, because I've been curious. This really is a new type of system for us, especially when we installed it over here at Enki. So I think, obviously we want to make sure that there is continued accountability. There are some firms that are more well-known in the industry for installation. We certainly would want to make sure that they're utilized if, in fact, that was the road we walked down in terms of, replenishing or resurfacing with the port-in-place surfacing.
What's the life expectancy of a proper pour-in-place system?
It's about 15 to 20 years, about 20 years, I believe, as a max.
Wow.
I have a question on the sunshades. Do we have a useful life for sunshades, and is there a maintenance cost for those?
Sure. So sunshades have about a 10 to 15 year sunshade. What do you call it?
Useful life.
Lifespan. So what happens is they're set in concrete with steel poles. The steel poles would have a 20-year lifeline. So it's the fabric itself that's stretched across the shading system that really would only be 10 to 15 years. So they're subject to, obviously, all of the elements in terms of, UV. UV actually does the most damage to everything, as I'm sure everyone knows. And then, of course, in rain, during the winter months, we would be responsible for taking them down. We wouldn't want to have a snow load on top of them. And as you know, sometimes we've had, pretty big snowstorms even in October. So we'd have to be mindful of the weather and make sure we're being proactive to take them down. And
so there's some ongoing costs.
There's a time commitment for certain. They're going to need to be cleaned, stored properly. I know that they have to be sealed so that mice can't get to them, because they'll have a field day with the fabric, and that's sometimes a difficult thing in the winter. I know we had some conversations with Mr. Higgins about that, and there was some willingness to maybe have contributions for storage and or assistance with that matter, to try to help us through that process if we needed some assistance, because that's something we would have to do feasibility on in terms of understanding our storage on this end. And then especially if we start to endeavor them at other locations, I think it's fair to say that if we do it at Enki, we're going to have an expectation for every playground moving forward that there are sunshades everywhere else.
I do like the idea of the pilot, though, if we do, is to see if it's even feasible, if it works.
Timing, Tammy, when could, if we decided we wanted to recommend this and the Board of Commissioners agreed with it, as quickly as could possibly be done, following proper procedures, when could we start? How long would it take?
So It might be a long shot to get it to the March 25th Board of Commissioners meeting. I'm sorry, the April 25th Board of Commissioners meeting, but it's not outside of the realm of possibility. It just depends on how quickly we can come up with the design and the costs, more so for the roofing systems, and finalize that. If that becomes an integral part of the project, that could take a little bit of time, because I'm not sure if those are going to need to be custom fitted, and if Playworld Systems, will have to customize those to this unit. So, because that's not an area that I endeavored in this project to date, because I know initially some of the conversations had to do with a larger shading system and trellises and things like that. So, so the roofing system wasn't something that was, really thought about. So probably go to maybe the first Board of Commissioners meeting in May or second in May. If there's, if there's approval to do this, we could, easily the next day put the order in. So I have to believe we're probably at least at maybe an 8 to 10 week delivery. And ideally, I think this is a project, at this point, probably, unfortunately, would probably be a long shot to get it done in summer, but maybe if it's something that could begin in August or September. September is probably a little bit more ideal, because in order to install the poured-in-place surfacing, it can't be 100 degrees. There's certain temperatures where the bonding and the putting the system together and melting it all down so that it can be poured, really ideally 60s, 70s is probably pushing it. So you have to be mindful of temperature. So we would want to tie that in. Then we also have to line up the contractor and their availability. So fall would probably be ideal on this project.
Well, are we ready as a board to make a recommendation? Do we have any further?
Can I ask one more question? Tammy, so you're looking at replacing the current system as it is, and I sort of lost myself on the wood chips. Is that a backup plan?
If that was the wish of this board, is to, save the additional funding, it could be priced out with the wood chips.
Long-term, do you think that the current system is better than wood chips?
I think both are great systems. They both work. Obviously, the poured-in-place system is, it looks nicer, it feels nicer, when you walk on it, and, it doesn't get pushed around and, kind of blown out of the main area.
Mm-hmm.
In this particular location, I think both work well. If you take a look at, Cowan has a significant amount of water that cuts through, the playground. Not to divert the conversation, I'm just using it as an example that Enki is a location where the wood chips would work well, because we don't have significant flooding in that area where it would cause major disruption.
It doesn't seem like there's a big difference in costs for the wood chips
Over
and
time.
over time, but
What do you mean?
what do you, yeah.
It's just the initial install is the big difference.
Yes.
The maintenance is going to be about the same, the life is going to be the same, because wood chips just get replaced every year. I think this park gets a lot of traffic just because we have people, again, from within the community because of Little League, but also because districts and Little Leagues from around the area come here. If there was going to be a park that we did the pour and play, I think this would be it, just for that reason. There's a lot more, let's just say, kids who aren't being attended to that are on that playground probably than other playgrounds in the township. So if there's a place to sort of maybe go with this, I would say this would be it.
Yeah, I'm inclined as well. I've expressed my concerns and skepticisms in the past on the sunshades. And I think if we're going to explode that to 20 parks, that $1 million+ can be used in much more pressing,
Well, he
I've got
disagrees.
support.
That doesn't sound like support to me, Bill.
Now we're gonna have umbrellas at all the parks now. Is that what
It
you're
is, it's
saying?
an exclamation point. I'd have a concern because I think there are a lot more pressing needs than creating shade when you can do that by picking the times you go to the park. That said, I think it's a good pilot program to try it. I do have grave concerns about I think this is going to be a money suck on the maintenance of the fabric, and it's going to break down and be a problem, putting aside the cost. But I think for a pilot program, let's give it a whirl, and let's do something with that fund that can do some good in the short run. And I think you go with the service, the current surface. I think that's the better way to go, and hope for a better vendor.
Anybody else have any personal suggestion or recommendation before we come up with a motion to make a recommendation to the commissioners?
I would say if there's money for the design at Odoricio, to include that as well. I would say that if there wasn't money for the design because of the pour and play, I would say to then go with the wood chips to allow for the design.
The only thing is we may not know the design until we meet with the community and have the meetings and go through all that. We have 275,000 in that account right now. Well, we also have the 125 actually, the additional money that was earmarked from Wayne Walk for Odoricio. So we have a little bit more. So I believe that would definitely get the design done.
So Tammy, do you think I'm trying to figure out what's feasible now or doable now in terms of coming up with a motion to make a recommendation to the commissioners. Should we be crafting language to support funding for installing the surface? I don't know if we have to be specific as to what kind of surface, but redoing the surface at Yankee Park and installing 2 to 3 sunshades. I don't know whether we want to cap the amount we would recommend be spent on that. And in addition to that, recommend that a certain amount from the fund be used to, or be applied to Odoricio to begin a design. I'm trying to figure out what's a good way to craft a motion. Have you thought about how you would structure this?
Well, I would say maybe just if we approve this project, the replacement of the safety surfacing, installation of sunshades, potential, installation of a roofing system on the large play structure at an estimated cost of the 135.
Okay.
And then I would suggest that the balance of the dollars remaining in the fund be earmarked towards Odoricio.
Okay. You're a lawyer, start drafting.
We can always come back and change it later because I think we have to give the opportunity to let the discussions evolve on Odoricio so we understand what the magnitude of design may be. We know what the design costs were on Fenimore. They exceeded 200,000, but it's a much larger project. So just to give you a ballpark, I don't see it being over 200,000 for design. We're talking about a much smaller area.
I like the idea, you drafting lawyers, of adding some kind of language.
And then we just add the balance, right?
Right, earmarked for Odoricio.
I have one, I never think like this.
Go ahead, Bill.
But in terms of vandalism,
Thanks.
it almost seems to me, with some respect, that these sunshades are looking for kids to do something. And I don't think like this normally, but it seems like an open invitation that's sort of standing at that. I don't think this way normally, but I had this feeling that it's waiting for someone to spray paint it, or God forbid, you know what I mean? That's my only reservation about these kinds of shades.
Well, I have to check, but I think there is an anti-graffiti coating that can be applied to them. So we'll take a look at that. So that doesn't mean that you can't put something on them or spray paint on them. You can, or do whatever, but it can be removed easily. So first of all, we'll take a look at that and do what we can to ensure that there maybe is some, coating that can, deflect that or allow for easy cleanup. But one thing I will say, they will be pretty high in the air. I'm not sure what the exact height is. I have to go back and look at the design, but I have to believe they're going to be at least a good 10 feet cantilevered over the respective area in which they would be covering on the perimeter of the the area. A child would have to like hoist themselves up on it to do anything destructive. That's not to say that they wouldn't do that. But I can also take a look in other towns that have sunshades and see what they've experienced. I know I did put some messages out on National Recreation Parks Association on these a while ago, just trying to understand pros and cons. Nothing like that came back. Doesn't mean that that hasn't happened, because people can destroy anything. The only thing I would say is we haven't really had any damage at the existing playground, but that's not to say that it doesn't happen, because we do have issues that happen in the parks.
Are there any examples locally of where sunshades are being used?
I believe Lower Merion has one down at
Oh.
the park, I believe, on Montgomery Avenue, if I'm not mistaken. There are some sunshades down there by the Rosemont School. I think there's sunshades there.
Okay.
I can also get a list together for you guys.
I'm
There are
curious
some.
just to kind of see it in action. Maybe Mr. Higgins has seen them locally.
I can get you a list of where they're located
Okay.
locally.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we have a proposed motion here, and I will make it. I move that this board recommend to the Board of Commissioners that it utilize funds within the Township Park Impact Fund for the replacement of safety surfacing, the installation of sunshades, and the potential installation of a roof on the large play structure at Yankee Park Playground at an estimated cost of $135,000, and that the balance of the fund be earmarked for design and implementation of improvements at Odoricio Park. We've got this written down, Tammy, so we can.
I'll second that if that was a motion.
That was a motion.
I'll second.
Bill is seconding the motion. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right. There we go. Yay, we did something. We'll write this out neatly for you. Well, this is recorded, right, too, so you'll.
It is.
get it. Okay. All right. We still have stuff on our agenda. Don't think you're going home yet.
Does it involve wood chips?
Well, the next up is Fenimore Woods. There's wood. There's wood. Fenimore Woods Park Renovations Project Review, input, discussion. I think we're all up to speed on what the story is with Fenimore Woods. Tammy, did you want to give us an update on where we are, what's happening, timeline, et cetera?
Sure. Just so tentatively, I know we're expecting in the coming weeks to hopefully be able to sit down with the firm that conducted the feasibility study of the stable and start to dig into that and take a closer look at it. So in hopes that May, and hopefully even maybe before June, we can get our next meeting together, which would be our roundtable meeting number 3. So that's the goal, is to make a lot of headway through that, through the remaining weeks in April, as well as into May, so that maybe the prospect of late May, we could be looking at sitting down and talking about that. So we're really excited to see what's put together. We're excited to see the outcomes and obviously start having those conversations. I think I mentioned last month, we're just continuing to look at grant prospects just overall for the project. We know there's some things that sit out there and, trying to eye some timelines with DCNR, DCED, a lot of the really big grants that, we've been successful in getting as a township in the past, and would definitely like to, bring Fenimore Woods forward again as a candidate. So I know our timeline's tentative, and unfortunately we are at the mercy of our engineers. So I know that both the hazardous materials and the structural assessments have all been done. They're finalized. So now they're just working on the reports and again, ready to sit down with staff after they put that all together and start to go through it. So tentatively, I think that's what we're looking at. We could make a decision on later we can make a decision if we think we want to have a meeting at the park to discuss the outcomes, or if we think, doing another roundtable-based meeting in this room or at the school district again, if we believe that that was in the best interest of everyone. So maybe we can talk more about that and maybe decide that once we have more information. I'm not sure which setting might be best, but it's nice to be at the park and talk about everything and walk around and look
Great.
at stuff too.
Well, and the timing would probably be right, too, I think. So the weather should, be nice at that point when we're ready to have that discussion. Anybody have questions or comments on Fenimore for Tammy or among ourselves? Are you here to comment on Fenimore?
I'm just here to listen.
You're just here to listen.
If I heard anything that
Nothing that deeply disturbs you?
I was prepared.
Oh, my. You need more faith in us.
Since the people on TV can't
Okay,
hear us.
yes,
I'm
that's
Michael
right.
Kearney, 124 Walnut Avenue, Wayne. I just want to say that our group, Fenimore Woods Coalition, we continue to communicate with one another. We stand ready at any time to come to a meeting, anytime, any place. We're very interested in hearing the results. And you should not consider sort of the lack of attendance as being any indication that we've lost our interest in the project. It's simply that from the agendas in particular that, we really haven't seen that there was any need for us to come and comment. So I just want to let you know that we're still in the game, we're still watching, and we're hoping for a good outcome. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. This should be quick. We'll move on to Odoricio Park and Cowan Park basketball court renovation projects. Update, Tammy?
The park renovation, basketball court renovations are underway. All of the equipment has been removed. The site is under major construction, so we just ask everybody to pay attention to the fencing, the signage, stay away from, the areas where you see equipment and machinery and all those kinds of things. I know over at Cowan, we have orange fencing that's placed up around the area. There's a 6-foot metal fence that's over around Odoricio, so we just ask folks to be careful and pay close attention, and we're excited the projects are moving forward.
Good.
Thanks for shepherding them through.
Thank you for supporting them.
Our pleasure. Odoricio Park improvements planning. Tammy, here were you thinking about going into a little more detail on what are some of the items and the details of the items we might be considering for Odoricio Park, or?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate that a letter went out to members of the public, so we want to continue to encourage folks to reach out to us to be added to our interest email list, because that'll be one way that'll help us communicate when meetings are coming and locations and all that kind of stuff. So we want folks to reach out, and also just keep tuned into looking at social media and looking at the website and the newsletters and all that. Obviously, we'll be publishing more information there. When we have upcoming meetings scheduled, and we're going to plan to put some notices up at the park. We have some communication boards and things that we can do that with. So we just want to let folks know that, if they feel compelled to reach out now. As a matter of fact, I've had some call, I've had some email to provide some input and information. So we just want to keep encouraging that and keep encouraging folks to just stay wired in so they know what's going on. And also, just, I guess, a little bit of the process. I know there's a lot of wants and wishes and ideas. We've heard things about, mountain biking in the wooded area. We've heard about pavilions instead of smaller comfort stations. There's some ideas of moving things around maybe within the space that we're looking at. But I just want to let folks know that we're interested in any and all ideas. As long as it doesn't involve the basketball court, the rest of the park is fair game.
Don't want one.
And the baseball fields, I'm sure, we don't anticipate anything major happening with that. I think it's in a perfect location. But as far as the parking lots, the ingress and egress to the park is difficult. There's some change that could be needed there. I don't think you can turn out onto West Wayne Avenue without turning into the other lane, especially if you're going towards Wayne. So, we want to, let folks know to, kind of keep in touch with us and just keep listening for more information. We anticipate, hearing what folks have to say. I think that's, the first step in the process is just trying to take it all in, kind of how we started the process with Fenimore Woods here. It's just really listening to what folks have to say and then starting to, sort of focus the communications a little bit more, the understanding more. And I think that's where, ultimately we're going to have to figure out what are the design elements. That way we can go and, get a designer to put it together and utilize the money, that we have there in the impact fund to start to work through that process. But it really starts with the public information and hearing what folks have to say. They can email, they can write, they can call, they can come visit us, and then most of all, when we start to have the more focused meetings, which I think, what I would suggest is in May, if we don't think we're going to have, we're going to be in time for a more focused meeting on Fenimore, maybe that's the time to, maybe have a town hall. I don't know if, for our May date meeting, which I'm not sure what the date is right off the top of my head here, but maybe we could plan to meet at the RTCA or at the park, because it's probably unlikely that we would have a specific Fenimore meeting in May. It may end up being our roundtable meeting and our special meeting later in May, where we start to hear more on the stable and the pavilion reports. So I think it's a little premature to think that conversation would start in early May for our next meeting. So maybe that's a good date to set. We could always wait till June. Folks are, I think, still wired in June, and schools are still in session. So that certainly would be an opportunity too. So maybe we can coordinate with Howard, who represents the Civic Association. Maybe we can try and work on, having maybe a location, like a meeting on location type of situation, so that it makes it more convenient for the neighbors to come out.
Tammy, I have a thought and a question about the communication on what we learned from Fenimore is that there were some neighbors that didn't get that communication. So is there a perimeter around the park that we've sent them to? Is, where Conestoga Road comes in? Because I know my neighborhood uses Odoricio as their park, and didn't see a letter. So I didn't know if
There was, and I know it didn't include your street. It's
Yeah.
a little far outside the zone that we identified.
do we need to make that zone a little bigger, or?
We can, I mean,
I know it's already done.
Sounds like it might be appropriate.
I just am anticipating what happened with Fenimore, which was the communications went out and
Yeah,
a lot of people
people
said
felt-
that they didn't get them. So, I know it is our residents' responsibility, as we all do, to pay attention and to know, but it might be helpful.
sure.
Maybe
The only
even-
thing
even
just
with
to
the commissioner, maybe even with our ward commissioner, to really make
Okay.
that information, who's Jack?
No, it's
Oh,
Jake.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we can ask Jake to send it out. I know we did share some of the information with him, so I
Right.
assume that went out. And I think he does a newsletter, I'm not sure. But the only thing that I would say, and I'm not discounting what you're saying, is where does it stop? Because I think we ended up in a situation with Fenimore where we had people on the entire other side of the township that were wondering why they weren't notified. So,
Right.
and, we're using social media. We have an e-newsletter that goes out every Friday. Folks can sign up for it. They can go to the website. There's a project website that's been set up for Odoricio's project and planning,
Good.
as well as for the basketball renovation project.
Do you
So,
have a Be Our Friend at Odoricio, like we had?
I'm sorry?
here? Like Be Our Friend at Odoricio, like we have here? One of those big.
we can ask for it to be moved. We can request that to
It
be
might
moved.
It might be worth it. It's just, at some point, especially if we're going to start to focus on Odoricio.
We do have a signboard. It's similar to what we have over at Fenimore right now, that advertises the Fenimore meetings and conversations. So we bought 2 more of those, and we were going to plan on putting those at Odoricio as soon as we have something to put on it. Like, as soon as we establish a meeting, we figured we would do that. But that does require people to be at the park, and then not only be at the park, but then see the sign. So, we really have relied heartily on, the electronic communications, but we can look at sending, a different letter, or maybe covering maybe there's the streets that we didn't cover. But like I said, I think we'll never get away from not including enough people. And that, just will continue to put us in that situation, I think, for every project moving forward. There's always going to be somebody that's like, you know, I used the park, why didn't you tell me?
Well, that's where I think posting at the park comes. I mean, you sort of try to think of all the angles. I mean, if someone, you know, is interested in a park, presumably they go there. If they go there, they should see something that's posted there. So even if they're not included in a, you know, a nearby area mailing or email blast or something like that, if in fact they go to that park, they should see a sign. So I think maybe we need to, you know, have belts, suspenders, and, safety pins, whatever. You know, maybe you need to do it a whole bunch of ways. Again, I do think, you know, we as citizens, we as residents, we have an obligation to keep ourselves informed by, you know, using social media, reading the website, or getting on the newsletter or whatever. But that said, you know, if we can try to avoid, you know, having a problem where people don't feel they were adequately notified because that's not their thing, then put a sign up the old-fashioned way. So, all right. And the flip. Sorry, I know it's, my grandson really laughs when I do that. He thinks it's hilarious. Okay, next up, Willows Park Preserve concerns about dogs in the Willows Park trails. Tammy, did you want to start off on this, or did you want me to talk about this?
I think the only thing I wanted to do was I wanted to start off by just noting the history. So we reviewed this, the Parks and Recreation Board reviewed this back in 2015. And I know that there was a motion that was passed. Well, first of all, let me start out by saying that the initial discussion started as a result of inconsistency in signage. So we had some parks that, like Emilyn, Tinnell, we had signage about dogs, that dogs were only permitted during certain hours and then not at others. And I know we had a resident come forward that, you know, wanted it to just be all of the time, especially given it was really the only park in that sort of region of the township that permitted dogs. So why not have it all the time and just try to preclude them from being in the softball field areas, which made sense. I know we had a park with North Wayne Park and Petrie Park that really weren't contemplated in terms of dogs. So Radnor Memorial, I think some of our parks that came to fruition later in the 2000s, with the exception, of course, of Friends of Radnor Trails Park, which I know we definitely have identified that as being almost like another dog park. So I know we were trying to clean up the signage in terms of how it looked visually as well. Some of the signs in some of the parks had, you know, a picture of a dog kind of like running free. And, you know, I thought, since we don't have, you know, we don't really have a defined leash law, maybe the picture of a dog that looks under control and on a leash could incentivize people to have control over their dog and maybe put them on a leash, because we know that we do have issues with that and have always had issues with that across the park system. So the thought was to create that consistency as well across the park system. I think we talked about it just a couple months, and we came back and there was a motion that was made. So I was gonna note the motion. So we started talking about it, I guess, in September 2015, and then we made a motion in November. And basically what that said was that it's just the Parks Board discussed the park informational signage relative to pets in parks. The following motion was made, seconded, and passed unanimously 5-0. It is the recommendation of the Parks and Recreation Board that the informational signage be designated and displayed consistently in all of the parks that permit dogs and should indicate the following. Pets are permitted, must be under control, showing the image of a dog on a leash. Please clean up after your pet, show the image of a person cleaning up. Similar inconsistency, those that do not permit dogs should be indicated with the corresponding signage. Furthermore, Petrie Park and North Wayne Park shall be designated to permit dogs. Radnor Memorial Park shall be designated not to permit dogs. So I just want to kind of give that little bit of context. Some of you, I think, were on the board. Andy, I know you were on the board, I think, when we went through that. We didn't belabor, I don't think it was a belabored discussion. They were pretty swift discussions, and you know, overall, I think it was good to clean some of that information up. I know there was a question initially about North Wayne Park. North Wayne Park had been a park where we didn't permit dogs because of the active sports that take place there. But I know we had a group of residents that got together and decided that they wanted to change that, so we flexed on that one. Right now, just to sort of dovetail, I know we have just to kind of make the board aware, we have a petition that's currently underway by the residents of the Cowan Park neighborhood. They have interest in permitting dogs. So that's something that may come before you within the grand scheme of our discussions on dogs. So I know we're talking about the Willows and dogs and the trail at the Willows and dogs and some other parts of this topic that have to do with Harford Park and fencing. I know we're sort of disjointed in a lot of different areas, but I wanted to make the board aware that that's something that could be coming before them. I also worked to put together a map that I wanted to share with you that shows across the township all of the dog permitted areas, just so you could kind of see that it is pretty evenly distributed. So when you take a look across the township and all of the locations, we do have a lot of dog permitted areas that really span the township and allow for a lot of good locations in different locations, or I mean across the township in different regions. So let me just pull that up if you're interested in seeing that.
Yeah.
While she's pulling that up, if I could just ask, is this being brought by like citizen concerns at the Willows, or how is this sort of?
That's how it first got raised, but I think it's become a little more, well, it's sort of still in the gelling stage, but it's become a little more of a comprehensive issue. If we're gonna, there's a broader issue across the township in
Right.
terms of, dogs here, dogs there. What do we mean in our ordinance by under control? Is there a problem here? Is there not a problem? Is there a problem in Harford Park? It's a pretty comprehensive problem, and then the question is, okay, there are all these issues. We have to be aware of all of them.
Right.
We need input on all of them, but then the question is, how do we address it? Do we address it comprehensively? Are there some scenarios that present a little more urgency in terms of resolving what we need to do? And that may be the problem at Skunk Hollow and the Willows, because now that the Willows is sort of coming back to life again, there's sort of a conflict in use between dogs running crazy and running through weddings and stuff like that, and trying to do events to raise funding to support restoration of the Willows. So
that's
maybe that's a little more of an urgent matter, like, well, what
Okay.
can we do there? But I think it's a comprehensive issue, and so on the one hand, I want to think comprehensively, but maybe the realistic thing in terms of solving it is to do it in a way that is somewhat incremental. We also have a lot of re-educating to do, because people have gotten used to the way things are or the way they think things are, and pulling back on that, it's going to be a difficult adjustment for a lot of people, so we have to be very sensitive to that. Am I saying this right, Tammy, or chime in here if?
No, I would definitely agree. And Andy, I can share with you the presentation
I just
and
didn't-
information that we had.
I just didn't know if it was like a specific incident or something that was.
Well, there have been, there have been some incidents at the Willows / Skunk Hollow
Okay.
specifically, but I also think there maybe were some reported incidents at Harford, of people using Kreuzberg. I mean, this may even have been pre-pandemic,
Okay.
because there was a lot more
All right, thank you.
non-dog foot traffic at Kreuzberg before the pandemic hit. So yeah. I'm sorry.
There have definitely been concerns that have been raised. We have, issues and problems that get reported to police over the years. I think the pandemic definitely exacerbated
Yes.
the issue. A lot of people got dogs. A lot more people started using parks. But I know, I think, like Mary said, the initial concern really is in and around the mansion, and I think that's something we really want to look at, just so we can kind of try to, keep folks away from that area. We have to discuss the trails too, because I know that on the Skunk Hollow Trail, they're permitted, so we let them use the parking lot at the Willows to be able to access that area. The problem is more people traverse through the mansion area, and when your dog's not on a leash, that's when the problem starts. And, we've even had situations where dogs have run into the mansion when the back doors of the patio have been open and disrupted events. So it's definitely something, we want to take a close look at. So the map that's up here, just where you see the paw prints in red, and I know the screen resolution isn't the greatest, you can see where the dog permitted areas are. So just, starting up above there at, I guess what would be 12 o'clock, you've got North Wayne. There's North Wayne at the top on the north side of Route 30. Hartford Park, which is, we know is, our big dog park location. Emilyn Tinnell Park, down in the lower right-hand corner. Ithan Valley Park, there at the bottom at 6 o'clock. Obviously, the Skunk Hollow and Sawmill, the Willows, we do not permit dogs, but we know there's just some flexibility for folks to use the parking lot so that they can access the Skunk Hollow Trail. Otherwise, dogs are not permitted in the Willows. And then
There's a problem with that because, lately, and I don't know whether it's because they're so close to where they can have dogs going into the trail or whatever, but a very high incidence, probably exacerbated by the pandemic, of dogs just blatantly running loose in the Willows proper, which, is a problem because they're not supposed to be there at all. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, Tammy.
No, that's okay. So the one in the center is it really just represents the Radnor Trail. So all along really I could have put paw prints all along there, but so the Radnor Trail, and then up above there
Can you send us a copy of this, please?
is Friends of Radnor
When you get a
Trails Park.
chance.
Absolutely.
Tammy,
I guess
what is
Petrie,
this-
Petrie's missing on here, I apologize.
What is the story on the Radnor Trail? It's funny, I'm trying to remember if I've ever seen dogs not on leashes on the Radnor Trail. What's the requirement on the Radnor Trail?
It observes the same code as all the
Same thing,
parks.
the under control. People seem to be a little bit better about that. Maybe that's because it's so heavily used.
And the bike's going
And the
so
bikes,
fast.
yeah.
You wouldn't want your dog being loose on that.
Well, the leashes are part of the problem on the trail because the leashes are across the trail, but that's a different story. Okay, thanks.
A lot of it's too what you're used to. So
Yes.
on the Radnor Trail, it's a paved path and people have.
Seems like a
leashes.
sidewalk.
Yeah, right, leashes.
Yeah,
and
in
it
my
just-
neighborhood, everybody's got their dog on a leash. Nobody's dog is running loose.
Right.
So it is a question of what people think perceive, what they think they can do, what they've gotten used to doing, regardless of what a sign might say. So we've got a lot of re-educating that might be involved as well. And I know the folks who've been on this committee for a while saw the report I did, I think it was 2 years ago at this point, on what the other municipalities in the area do. And they are all much stricter than Radnor. Radnor's the only township in the area that does not have a leash requirement. There are other townships that have run the gambit on what they do, but Lower Merion and Tredyffrin, I thought, were two townships that were very thoughtful in how they had figured out, this park okay during these hours and permits and other things that they did to sort of accommodate just about everybody. So I thought that they might be good models. But Radnor seems to be the outlier in terms of not requiring leashes, and it may be that folks in other townships have caught on to that, and that's part of the reason we have so much traffic on Skunk Hollow Trail. The states, absolutely, dogs must be on leash, and federal government, dogs must be on leash, and all of the area private parks like McCaig and Okahawking and name a few others, they all have leash requirements as well. So totally Radnor stands out, query why, and do we want to revisit that, or at least in some areas, do we want to revisit that? There's lots of options, lots of things we can do, from total bans to partial bans, to restrictions on hours, to restrictions on specific locations, to leashes, not leashes, dog parks, small dog parks, big dog parks. There are a lot of options. So what I think are, well, here's two things. We want the public, if you're out there paying attention to this public, we want input, over the next, well, nobody has to wait for a meeting to come into a meeting to give input, what their feeling is about dogs in parks, generally in the township, or dogs in Willows/Skunk Hollow in particular, leashed, unleashed, total ban, permits, whatever. We want to hear from the community because I'm sure that people have strong feelings, especially the dog owners. So I would urge people to communicate with us without waiting for a meeting, but also to come in and speak up at a meeting. But also contemplating a la Fenimore, some sort of dedicated meeting where we could have a workshop and people talk and exchange ideas on what might work. And again, if we have to do this in pieces, you know, there are pros and cons to piecemeal approaches on things, but this is to do this all at once, I think, would take forever. I think if we can figure out where the most urgent areas are and deal with them first, having thought about it comprehensively and then taking action in a little more piecemeal fashion, and doing a lot of it re-educating as well. I don't know, did I leave anything out, Tammy, that you wanted to add? Yeah, Claire, go
Can I
ahead.
add something?
Yeah, sure.
I'd like to see our board take some timeline to get this moving, because we seem to have done a lot of discussing over the years. And it would be not just necessarily put things in place, but to have a consistent that things need to be put into place, right? So that
Yeah, I'm sort of surprised that we haven't gotten more input. I mean, Tammy, maybe you get more, although I think you share everything. We really need the input from the community, because I know I could come up and you know, sit at my kitchen table and come up with some sort of plan. I'd probably use Lower Merion as the model, because I think they really did a nice job. But I'm not somebody walking a dog on these trails. I don't have a dog. So we really need to hear from everybody. And then I think maybe ideally, we have, you know, we've already talked about needing to have a workshop, roundtable type meeting for Odoricio soon, maybe May, then Fenimore sometime. We don't want to do it in August when nobody's here. So I'm thinking, I would like to actually have this more comprehensive meeting, me personally, sometime in the fall, so that we can get moving on this and start implementing some changes if we think changes are needing. So that's sort of, at least in my mind, Claire, my mental working timeline. But, you know, maybe we do want to come up with something that's more, you know, concrete, more written down. Tammy, am I making sense here on timing of having a more comprehensive, dedicated meeting on this topic? Or, Tammy, maybe you could tell us what we have done, what the township has done, other than, you know, having this on the agenda every month, in terms of inviting comment on this issue.
To date, we've put some stuff out on social media to solicit feedback. We initially had it focused more on the Willows and Skunk Hollow, and then we broadened it to just include all parks, so we did modify it at one point. It's also included in our weekly e-newsletter that goes out. We have a whole section on there. Not only that, but it also like reminds folks, you know, be under control, keep their dogs under control, pick up after their dogs, and, you know, places where they're permitted, you know, those kinds of things. Just some, you know, gentle reminders. So I know we're in the process of updating the kiosks. We were waiting for them all to be cleaned, so we were gonna add some stuff to the kiosks, like the kiosk at Hartford. There's a few kiosks at the Willows, and put some additional signage out there, you know, recognizing folks are going to be, you know, out in more full force, you know, than they are now soon when the weather really changes. So we can continue to do that if we think that, you know, the fall, September, October is realistic. We would probably, you know, want to start to, you know, advertise that, you know, June, July, and start saying, okay, but we may want to preface it with, you know, specifically what we're looking for from the residents, like, versus it's just, we're just going to have a discussion and we want to hear feedback, like, I think we have to. What are some of the issues? Yeah, I think we have to put some of those out there, like, if, you know, and if we're going to just start to talk about Skunk Hollow and the Willows first and not other parks, I think, you know, we have to kind of focus that, because I think the problems are different in all the different locations. So if you go over to Hartford, you know, I don't think anyone on this board is going to advocate to put dogs on a leash at Hartford. I think it just would go against, you know, have a dog park. But, you know, are there other methods that need to be in place over there? Is there a way that we need to control residency? Do we need to create fencing and separations for, you know, a larger dog area versus a smaller dog area? I understand those can be very successful. I think Lower Merion has done that as well. So somehow we need to, because like folks who maybe go to Hartford and Hartford's their place, they don't really care what's going on at the Willows, and vice versa. So I think we have to focus, and maybe it's multiple issues in one night. Maybe by that point, Cowan and the petition comes to fruition, and then we've got to sift through that one and make a decision. So I think, really narrowing it down.
I think what might be, to get attention is, and to bring it to a head a little bit and maybe draw people out, is to suggest we are contemplating recommendations of changes to, A, what parks dogs can be in, and whether you need a leash or not. And then from there, I think the discussion will naturally branch out to other subsets of, hey, how about here, it's different there. But I think that the initial identified problem was interaction with unleashed dogs, and then what laws are on the books or ordinances are on the books. That might be a good starting point, and also folks who have a passion on it might be drawn by hearing, oh, it might be changed. It might be cause for optimism of change that they want, or concern that the way things are, they don't want changed. Right. Just my 2 cents on it.
Yeah, I think the idea of having a dedicated meeting in the fall, bring this to a head.
Yeah.
Get, put the continued notice out there. And am I right that any recommendation this board would have to get to the Board of Commissioners, which would then allow a second level of debate? So it's not like this is the be-all.
Oh, yeah,
any meeting
right.
here would be a be-all, end-all. So, but I would just say, let's draw, sort of piggyback off what Claire said. Draw a line in the sand. This is the meeting. This one we're dealing with. This one we're going to address it. And we're not kicking the can down the road.
Yeah. And same as I said with Odoricio, yeah, it would be, I don't know when the timing is on the kiosks, but again, postings that the people who are actually in the case of Willows, Skunk Hollow, who are there, I mean, they're parking right next to that kiosk. Maybe we need a kiosk or some sort of signage at the other end of the trail too. I don't know if too many people enter with dogs at Sawmill, but maybe they do. But I think the signage right there for people who aren't, really aren't paying attention to social media or, email, or aren't signed up for the newsletter for whatever reason, do get notice. So.
And I think this week we had every intention of getting out and getting the signs up in the kiosks. We have them ready, they're all printed, they're laminated. It's just, I think the weather held us back at the end of the week. So next week, I don't see any reason why we can't do that.
Yeah, that'd be good. Yeah, getting that input in and getting the lay of the land and then getting focused, I think.
And giving people some time to
Think about it.
Think about what they want or what they don't want, and to have people come out, community come out and really give feedback on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Anything else, guys? Okay, one last issue. Park Playground Communication Board's proposal. Update on that, Tammy.
Sure. I have a final design that's with the sign company under development right now. And I actually, tomorrow, have a meeting with the sign company to look at all the locations. So the first area where we're going to install the communication boards is going to be Clemacrone Park. Given the dynamics of the park, the size, the usage, and all of that. And it also is a park that's, it's new. It's not going to go under renovation anytime soon. So establishing the communication boards there means they'll be there for a long time, provided nothing happens to them. So the goal is to have them affixed to the inside of each of the gates. So there'll be a large board that'll be developed on sort of like a high resolution type of panel that'll be affixed to the post and rail fencing. It will be approximately 4 foot by 4 foot, given the size of those areas, which makes sense. So I'm hoping, depending on the timeline for fabrication, that within the next month or two, they're installed and we can do, an unveiling, and maybe try and, get some of the folks out who were instrumental in getting this project going. And, have an unveiling, have a grand opening for it, and kind of celebrate them. And then now, finally getting the process down can help adapt them to new locations. So Enki, once Enki maybe is if Enki goes under construction and then reopens, I think we're going to want to make sure that they're designed and created within there. Of course, in that space, we might only need one. And then start to talk about future locations, and where we put these, depending on the location. Certain parks we know that were constructed in the 1990s might not be ideal locations just yet if those playgrounds are going to change, but we can certainly have that conversation. So it's unfolding and it's exciting, and it's finally, we've been able to bring it to fruition. It's been a long road, just given the proprietary nature of the symbols and how to get them and put them together, and then it all had to be created in a Photoshop board, and now transitioned so that it's like a high-resolution image now for the printing company to be able to put it together and actually print it and capture it. So we're excited that the project's finally developing.
It's good. It's always good when we complete a project. Flip page. Doesn't look like we have much public participation remaining. One thing we forgot to talk about, and we can do the Band-Aid approach again this month, is we need someone to sit in on the next Shade Tree Commission meeting. I'm not sure even when the date of that is. Bill, do you remember it all? Tim, you wouldn't have that handy, would you?
It's usually the week before.
Well, we're early this time. Oh, yeah, please don't worry about that, Bill. I mean, I'm happy to do, if I'm free, I'm happy to do it. I just don't know the date. It just occurred to me, we really need to at least, and then we have to resolve this for the long term, but we can wing it one more month, I think.
You can always do it by email too, who's gonna pick it up.
Bill, you see
Yeah.
why I ended up staying as our liaison
Yeah,
for
yeah.
all those years. It's just a great board to participate on, and so much has happened in the last 5 years.
It's a great time to be on a Shade Tree Commission, too. Coming up, anything, Tim, we can? All right. I'm happy to do it. I just want to make sure it's not a day when I'm in, like, Harrisburg or something.
It's very different. It's so different.
It's Wednesday, April 27th.
Of course, I don't have my calendar with me, so what time are?
6:30.
6:30? All right, tentatively, it's me.
If you can't go, let me know.
Okay, April 27th? I'll check. I stupidly didn't bring my calendar with me.
April 27th is a Wednesday.
Wednesday. God only knows. Okay. So many boards.
And what I can do is I can send the dates around, and we'll try and populate
Yeah.
like the next 6
I would like to
months.
have, a fixed person, but, we didn't get to it tonight, and, I'm happy to do it until we have an established person assigned. So, okay, on that note, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody. It's a long meeting. Wow, it was a really long meeting.
Gavel.